to you.
Good morning, members and officers and members of the public joining us for the Place and Resources Scrutiny Committee on the 26th of February 2024 at County Hall. My name is Councillor Shane Bartlett and I'm chairing the Scrutiny Committee meeting. The officers attending overall for the agenda will be Jan Britton, Executive Lead for Place, Jonathan Mayer, Corporate Director, Legal and Democratic, Lindsay Watson, Senior Democratic Service Officer. Other officers will be introduced as required during the meeting. Please remember that when you use your microphone, you must press the button to switch off your microphone after you've spoken, as the system only allows one microphone to be in use at any one time. The red light means that your microphone is on and the camera will automatically pan towards you. Please speak directly into the top of the microphone and avoid turning your head away when speaking. Please can I remind non-committee members that they will be given the opportunity to speak before the committee debate on each item. And I will ask you if you can introduce yourselves before you speak. If I move to agenda item 1, apologies. Do you have any apologies, please, Ms Watson?
Chairman, we have apologies from councillors Andy Canning, John Andrews, David Shortell, David Took and Rod Adkins.
Thank you. I'll move to agenda item 2, minutes, to confirm and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of January 2024. Members, are you all in favour of the minutes being a correct record? Thank you. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Does any member have a declaration of interest they wish to make, and if so, the action they will take? I have no declarations of interest. Thank you. Agenda item 4, Chairman's update. There are no updates on this occasion. Agenda item 5, public participation. So we have 3 questions.
3 questions. Yeah.
So could I ask Mr. Peter Mole if he could read his question, please? Sorry, you're reading Andrew Davis's question, I understand it. I am using my chairman's discretion to allow you to do this. It's an exception to normal committee procedure, okay? So on this one occasion, I will allow it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, I'm Peter Mole. I'm the coordinator for the Fontwell Magna Speedwatch group, but this question I'm asking on behalf of Andrew Davis, who was previously chairman of our parish council in Fontwell Magna. Dorset highways take a narrow interpretation of the 2013 Department for Transport Guide on speed limits. This states applications for 20 mile an hour should not be on roads where the movement of motor vehicles is the primary function, i.e. A roads. But the same Department for Transport guidelines also states in para 88, based on this positive effect on road safety and a generally favourable reception from local residents, traffic authorities are able to use their power to introduce 20 mile per hour speed limits or zones on major streets where there are or could be significant numbers of journeys on foot, and or where pedal cycle movements are an important consideration. And this outweighs the disadvantage of longer journey times for motorised traffic. My question to Dorset councillors is, why doesn't the speed policy take account of exceptional circumstances in allowing a 20 mile per hour limit, as in the case of the dangerous A350 that dissects Fontwell Magna? Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Moll, if you could read your question, please. Thank you.
There's a response to Andrew Davis.
Beg your pardon. Apparently there is a response to it. Thank you. Mr. Burden.
Yeah, good morning, committee. Good morning, Chair. During the development of the policy, Dorset Council members made clear that it would not be appropriate to include a clause relating to the term exceptional circumstances, but they wished to see officers considering applications on a location-by-location basis within an agreed criterion. The interpretation of the policy means that 20 miles an hour should not ordinarily be considered on roads which form the strategic backbone of the network or other main roads catering for large goods vehicles, bus routes and longer distance traffic, unless, as per paragraph 84 of the DFT guide to setting speed limits, referenced in the question, that there is clear evidence of high levels of pedestrian and cycle movement, or there is a potential for high levels of pedestrian and cycle movement if a 20-mile-an-hour scheme was introduced. The priority criteria matrix at Annex A of the policy ensures that the current and potential active travel levels, meaning walking and cycling, are considered. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. If I can now move to Mr. Moll, if you could ask your question, please.
Thank you. Almost 2 years ago, I and others explained the dangerous road safety situation in Fontmell Magna, where vulnerable pedestrians have to share the carriageway with hundreds of speeding vehicles. We generally do not have footways. Our ancient roads, including the A350, are not engineered or regulated to be fit for purpose. Councillors complimented us on our well-informed and articulate representations and declared, "We must listen and act." I coordinate our community Speedwatch team. We did our most recent monitoring session on the A350, where children going to and from school, elderly dog walkers and others have to share the narrow road with hundreds of speeding vehicles each day. Alarming incidents, including near misses with young children, are too frequent, and nervous people now use the car for village journeys of a few hundred yards or stay at home. Any speeds much above 20 miles an hour at the monitoring point are very dangerous as pedestrians and vehicles mix. There is currently a 30-mile-an-hour limit. We recorded over 20% of vehicles travelling at 35 miles an hour or more, which is 6 times the average level of offending at Speedwatch sites across Dorset. Each day, hundreds of southbound vehicles traverse this point at speeds which would make them liable for prosecution. Children, the elderly, and others are exposed to needless risk. ROSPA estimates that in collisions, child injuries treble when speeds are 30 miles an hour rather than 20, and the chance of death for adults increases 8-fold. The statistics are shocking, and we do not wish a tragedy to be the trigger for remedial action. Our request for a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, supported by 5 out of 6 residents, has been turned down for reasons which would not be considered reasonable in the majority of local authorities in the UK today, or pass informed third-party scrutiny. You know our roads are not currently engineered or regulated to be fit for purpose. Across the UK, 20 miles per hour policies have been introduced in the majority of local authorities, which would address the shameful situation in Fontmell Magna. Will action be taken to ensure all road users who have to share the carriageway, including the most vulnerable, have their needs fully taken into account to prevent their current exposure to unreasonable levels of risk? Thank you.
Mr. Burden.
Thank you, Chair, and I should have apologised, introduced myself as Tony Burden. I'm the Road Safety Manager for Dorset Council. So we are very grateful for the efforts of the local community Speedwatch teams, because they are a crucial part of the road safety strategy, demonstrated by the fact that last year they provided evidence which led to 12,600 warning letters being issued to motorists. We encourage other communities to consider forming a group, with further details being available on the Dorset Road Safety Partnership website. I can confirm that the needs of all road users using the network, especially the most vulnerable, are considered when a 20-mile-an-hour application or any other highway measure is considered. Recorded road traffic collision levels for the village of Fontmell Magna remain low, with recent analysis showing that the new speed indicator device has resulted in a reduction in speeds at the location in question. Due to the constraints created by the geometry of some of our village roads, it is not always possible to install significant highway improvements, such as new footways. We take the issue in Fontmell Magna seriously, and we will continue to work with all partners to consider additional proportionate safety measures, which includes working in partnership with Dorset Police to enhance their speed camera enforcement capability. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Burden. If we can now move to our third and final question, Mr John Robert Davis, please.
Thank you, Chair. John Roberts Davis from Fontmell Magna Parish Council. This question really relates to the policy in general and how it's been applied so far, and references to our own application are really for examples. For an application to be rejected, as was the case in Fontmell Magna, for example, on the grounds that the A350 is a strategic route, where the movement of vehicles is the primary function, is clearly not what's intended by government guidance, which presupposes fitness of purpose. In the last 10 years across the UK, scores of dangerous primary routes have had 20-mile-an-hour sections introduced, where risk management demonstrates this as the best form of risk containment. The A350 is a prime example of risk to human life being above normal and reasonable levels. Therefore, risk containment is essential. Rejecting any 20-mile-per-hour application simply based on Dorset Council's chosen categorisation of a road within it fails to meet Dorset County Council's responsibilities under the Equality Act. The Equalities Impact Assessment, I think, will be included in Mr Burden's report later in section 12.1, states that, quoting, the policy is directly aimed at having a positive impact on vulnerable road users, including children and the elderly. This starts at the application stage, when members, parish and town councils are required to consider these concerns, and they will then form part of the evidence base for an application. The potential benefits to vulnerable road users are considered throughout the process. End of quote. A grandmother walking her child from one part of the village to the school along a road with very poor sight lines and absolutely no footway, where there's a serious risk of injury or even death, would be right to feel let down by how this policy has been applied. Residents of a village which is cut in two by such a road have an equal right to enjoy the outdoor environment, to access local businesses such as the shop or pub, to meet together at their village hall, or simply to walk their dog without having to drive to do so. They should not need to resort to using their car as a means of self-defense in their own village. People should not need to use their cars as a means of self-defense. The primary purpose of a road should not be a label glibly applied along its entire length. Common sense says that at some points on any road, protection of vulnerable users could be the priority. So the question is, will the Council instruct the person responsible for ensuring the safety of all road users to investigate the problem and propose a solution? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Roberts Davis. Mr Burden, if you could reply, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Dorset Council has introduced several 20-mile-an-hour safety schemes in previous years, and the report clearly outlines progressive plans to install further schemes where appropriate. The risk factors raised within this question are all matters that would be considered as part of a community's application, together with understanding the impact of any speed reduction on the wider road network. To demonstrate how complex this work can be, the committee may find it useful to note that Wales have recently identified a detrimental impact that recent 20-mile-an-hour schemes have had on their rural bus route journey times, and are in the process of considering reverting some routes back to 30 miles an hour. Some residents living on or near to a main road within our village communities can be affected by severance, and this issue is taken very seriously. But because of the road geometry of many village environments, it is not always possible to install highway improvements, such as new footways, to alleviate these difficulties. Where highway improvements are technically possible, it is our duty to ensure that available funding is used for schemes where it will make the biggest impact and save the most lives. Each year, Dorset Council receive many more requests for highway improvements than we can build, and therefore we must prioritise schemes against an agreed set of local transport plan goals. The road safety team will commit to reviewing this location with other highway colleagues to consider whether any additional proportionate highway measures are technically achievable, and will work with the newly formed Fontmell Magna Road Safety Group. I would just like to take this opportunity to highlight that residents, businesses and visitors are invited to share their views on what they consider to be the big transport opportunities and issues across the whole of Dorset to shape the new local transport plan. Details of how to get involved can be found on the Council's website. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Burton, and thank you, gentlemen, for your questions. I now move to statements received. Statements are, in accordance with the Council's rules on public participation, are not read out in the meeting, but they are published as a supplement to the agenda and have been made available to the committee. We've had 3 statements from Councillor Ian Vaughan Arbuckle from Langton Matravers Parish Council, from John Adlam and from Dilys Gartside. Thank you. So if I move to agenda item 6, questions from councillors. Ms Watson.
Chairman, we haven't had any questions from councillors on this occasion.
Thank you. We'll move to agenda item 7. The first substantial item within our agenda today for the 20 mile per hour policy. The recommendation is to review the progress on the policy delivery and to note the potential for new national guidance on 20 mile per hour for England. Can I remind members that we are discussing the policy and not individual cases or applications. The presenting officer is Mr Tony Burden, for the road safety manager to present to include a PowerPoint presentation as well. And Mr Jack Wiltshire, head of highways, is also attending the meeting. So if I can hand over to you, please, Mr Burden. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So as a reminder, on the 1st of November 2022, the 20 mile per hour policy was approved. The policy is aimed at introducing 20 mile per hour schemes, ensuring greater safety for pedestrians and cyclists and improving the quality of life. Effectively, there are 3 ways to achieve a 20 miles an hour, either through the community-led request process, either as by a highway improvements measure or as a new housing development. How do we promote the policy? It's fair to say that the policy is high profile and has received significant interest during development. A news release was circulated once the policy went live, with a progress release completed last week. We created a new website to allow the public access to the policy guidance, and there was also a new online application form for parish and town councils and local members. We also conducted a webinar with the Dorset Association of Parish and Town Councils on the 7th of February last year, with 62 delegates attending, and at that stage it was the highest attended webinar. We also promote the schemes through regular contact with our Dorset Council members, Parish and Town Council, with our normal liaison engagement. It's fair to say that levels of interest have shown that the policy is well known within the community. We do receive regular contact from the community on this issue. So what have been the levels of interest? By the 31st of December last year, there had been 25 formal applications, with 24 other locations having expressed an interest. The first application itself was submitted 3 hours after the Cabinet sign-off back in November. During engagement, many communities raised concerns about speeding, but were sometimes uncertain as to whether 20 mile an hour would be the right approach for their community. So, for example, slow signs, a speed indicator device, a community speed watch group, or a different, more appropriate speed limit have all been valid options considered before moving towards a 20 mile an hour application. Interest in the community speed watch has increased, which was partly the reason, or part of one of the positive aspects of the policy. We sought to achieve this. So how have we conducted operational delivery? We've taken a phased approach to community-led applications, supported by the creation of an oversight group called the 20 mile an hour panel. The panel decide on what applications meet criteria and can progress to formal public consultation as part of the traffic regulation order process. and will also consider which applications reach sufficient priority for capital funding. The 20-mile-an-hour panel members include the portfolio holder for highways, travel and environment, the cabinet lead member for highways and travel, the transport planning team leader, the transport planning implementation manager, and myself as the road safety manager. Phase 1 applications. So the panel considered applications submitted before the 1st of March 2023. Decision at that time was that 5 locations can move forward to public consultation. 1 application didn't meet criteria, 1 required further investigative work, and 1 was withdrawn to allow for a speed indicator device within the existing 30 miles an hour. Bridport Town Centre, Langton Matravers, Pimpen, not included in the A354, Wimborne Town Centre, which included a slight extension to their current 20 miles an hour, and Winford Newborough were the ones that were supported. Applications have progressed at a pace that has been commensurate with the levels of operational demands and risks being managed by the Highway Service. Successful communities will be provided with a 20-mile-an-hour toolkit to help communicate the introduction of the new speed limits. So phase 2 applications. So the 20-mile-an-hour met to consider applications submitted between the 1st of March and the 31st of December. Decision on this occasion was that 6 locations can move forward to public consultation, and they are Chesilbourne, Child Oakford, a road called the Causeway in Milbourne St Andrew, Oakford Fitzpaine, Winterbourne Kingston, and roads of Allenview Road and Burts Hill within Wimborne. The above schemes will go for public consultation as part of the traffic regulation process in the summertime. So in relation to the responses to the consultation to phase 1, during the phase 1 public consultation, there was a 78% majority in favour compared to those that objected, with a small number of general comments. Those supporting 20 miles an hour raised the following key themes: that it will improve road safety, will improve the environment, will reduce noise, and will increase active travel. An assessment of the objections noted the following main category of concerns. Concerns around the fact that it will not be enforced, it will increase pollution and congestion, it's not required because speeds were already low or there were too few collisions in a particular location in question, while that money should be spent on other measures such as fixing potholes. Several of the comments related to the desire to increase the scope of the 20 mile an hour to other areas. So in addition to community-led requests, several 20 mile an hour schemes on new housing developments are progressing, with Curtis Fields and Weymouth being closest to delivery. We also have the opportunity to be proactive and install a 20 mile an hour as part of a 20 mile an hour improvement scheme. And it's worth noting that the increasing popularity of the School Streets initiative will enable the installation of supporting 20 mile an hour schemes. This is a picture of a 20 mile an hour scheme at Chickle down in Weymouth. But separate to School Streets, we are considering a 20 mile an hour scheme at a school in Weymouth, where it is no longer necessary to retain the school crossing patrol, with new safety measures, including the 20 mile limit, being identified. So 20 mile an hour enforcement. And I know this is of significant concern to the community. Dorset Police is the agency responsible for the enforcement of speed limits, and they have made a statement on their position on 20 mile an hour within the committee report. Each new 20 mile an hour scheme will have a supporting traffic regulation order, with the police always being consulted during the making process. Dorset Road Safety Partnership. The Assistant Chief Constable and the Police Crime Commissioner meet on a regular basis with Dorset Council to discuss a range of road safety issues, including enforcement of road traffic legislation, and this will include 20 miles an hour. The partnership is actively developing a plan to enhance the level of speed camera enforcement for all speed limits in a drive to improve road safety and reduce collisions, which includes last week's announcement by the PCC relating to the new auto speed watch cameras. Department of Transport and their plan for drivers. So I'm sure the committee has seen that some recent comments from the government. So the Welsh Government approach to 20 miles an hour and the expansion of ULEZ in London has resulted in the UK Government announcing their plan for drivers review with an intention to update the 20 mile an hour guidance for England to help prevent inappropriate blanket use. It is important to recognise that Dorset Council does not have a blanket use of 20 miles an hour, but it will be necessary to consider a review of our policy once DF2 guidance has been provided. So in summary, 20 mile an hour speed limits remain emotive and can generate strong views from all sides of the community, and this is evidence from our own experience and at the national level. The policy is leading to the implementation of new 20 mile an hour schemes where appropriate. The policy has helped bring clarity to the process, enabling officers to take a proportionate response to requests. A recent public consultation has shown that most respondents were in favour of 20 miles an hour, but this does not necessarily guarantee good levels of compliance with a sign-only scheme. Key to implementing any successful scheme is for it to be delivered in collaboration with education, training, publicity and enforcement for all road users. Our long-term goal is to achieve Vision Zero by eliminating death and serious injuries on Dorset's roads. 20 miles an hour speed limits have a role to play in this, but they will not be appropriate for all locations, and other safety measures directly targeted at collision cluster sites may have a greater impact on reducing collisions. The policy impacts positively on Dorset Council's ambition to be greener and cleaner. And finally, we will keep the policy under review and will consider future DFT guidance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Burden. Okay, if I can now move to, oh, sorry, Mr. Wiltshire, did you wish to add anything? No, thank you. If I can just now move to the portfolio holder, please. Councillor Bryan, did you wish to add anything?
Only one item, if I may, Chairman. I'm Councillor Ray Bryan, portfolio holder for Highways, Travel and Environment. Earlier on in the report, Tony mentioned the Dorset Road Safety Partnership. I'd like to point out that I also attend that, along with my lead member, and several of the officers attend those meetings with us. It's a very important committee, and I can tell you now they take their responsibility very seriously. I just thought I'd raise that as a point of clarity.
Thank you, Councillor Bryan. I'll now move to any non-members who wish to ask a question. So if I can move to Councillor.
Any Dorchester East. I wonder if I could ask a question around school streets, because I represent, as I said, Dorchester East, and we have 3 schools within one area. We have got an experimental order at the moment for school streets that we have to keep adding various issues to get it right. We're working to perfection. And I wanted to ask if we would have to go through a whole process of, obviously we'd need to do consultation, but the application and working forward, which we've heard the length of time it takes, to get added to the school street order now, the 20 mile an hour, because it was not put in at the inception. And of course, school streets are quite new, and if we can get this right in Dorchester East, that would form a good basis for the rest of the county. But I would not be wanting it to come in to get rid of a school crossing patrol, because we need that as well. So the question really is, do we have to then go through another 6 months process and the consultation to get the timing, to get the 20 mile an hour put in, added to the school street order? And the policy to enable it to happen as a matter of course for other schools who want to do school streets. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before you answer, Mr. Burden, it covers one of my questions as well, that could this just be automatic when we look at the to school street scheme on page 17 at 5.8? But it would seem to me that we should just do it as an automatic policy in front of our schools if it's not on an A road.
So in relation to the school streets, that would come under the highways improvement opportunities. So to directly answer the question from Councillor Rennie, we are considering a 20-mile-an-hour for that location, so it wouldn't be necessary for the Town Council to submit a separate application.
And is there any consideration to make it as an automatic policy in front of schools?
We haven't got an automatic policy, but absolutely, if there's a request that relates to a school, then that would likely to be a high priority as long as it met the other criteria. But we haven't got a separate part of the policy that's said automatically done for schools.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. Councillor Rennie, you wish to come back?
Yeah. Let's come back then, because you're doing a review of this policy through this scrutiny committee. Would it not be appropriate now to have it in automatically for school streets if they need it, or from the very beginning to have that ability to have it put in if it's found necessary?
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. When we come to the debate on it, if the members are minded to make a recommendation from this committee, then yes, we can move forward with that. Thank you. Councillor Sumper.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Jane Sumper, Beacon Ward, where also Fontmell Magna is part of. Given that no applications or few applications for 20 miles an hour on A roads that run through built-up villages have been successful, I'm concerned that the policy wording may be blocking these applications for 20 miles an hour on major roads from coming forward. While there's no support for a blanket 20 miles an hour on major roads, I know that this wasn't the intention of the policy to make it impossible in any circumstances or exceptions. Chairman, would it be appropriate for this committee to consider coming back at some future date to this particular section of the policy once some requests for 20 miles an hour on A roads have come forward, to see how they have progressed and to keep this very important point on the radar because so far it is untested? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Burton, did you wish to comment?
Yes, absolutely. I'll be more than happy to come back at a later stage to discuss that particular point. I would just emphasise at the present moment in time, we other than Fontmell Magna, I haven't had any applications in relation to, for example, on the strategic road network.
Did you capture that? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Sumper, you wish to come back?
Yes, just one other point. If an application has multiple aspects to it within a village, including possibly an A road, but other side roads as well, does that have an impact on a blanket no on an application, or are there possibilities of accepting part of the application as a positive for a 20 mile an hour if it excludes the A road within that?
Mr. Burton.
Absolutely. So if I could use the example of Pinburn, where their application was actually for the village, the residential streets of Pinburn, and not including the A354, and that was successful. So it is possible for a community to submit an application and then to have those discussions as part of the process as to which roads are appropriate. So yes, I'm more than happy to engage with Fontmell Magna to discuss a potential application in relation to those residential streets.
Thank you. Councillor Beddoe.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Laura Beddoe, and I represent West Purbeck. I'm one of two councillors. Really just some feedback. Winfrith Newborough is in my ward, and we are not discussing, obviously, individual cases, but the policy. And my feedback is with regard to the implementation, I suppose, of the policy. Just to say thank you publicly to the team, because my parish council is incredibly proactive. They've got a very good speed watch scheme. They've done a huge amount of engagement with residents of the village who typically might not be engaged. And I just wanted to reflect that actually I don't support a blanket anything. I really do support communities coming forward and liaising with our experts to make the right decision for their community. And I wanted to just say that on this occasion, it's been a really lengthy, complex, but positive experience. And I know that the chair of the parish council in Winfrith has been incredibly proactive, but is also really, really happy with the toolkit, the implementation, the communication. So I just want to say thank you, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beddoe. Okay, I'm going to go to committee now. So questions from the committee, please. Councillor Heatley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Brian Heatley from Robert and Wyke in Weymouth. When this policy was agreed back in November 2022, I must admit I did wonder whether we'd be sitting here today and there maybe would have been one or two schemes agreed, because it did seem incredibly difficult. So I'd like, first of all, to put on record that I'm pleased that we have as many as 5 actually going ahead with, for sure, and we have another 6 that are well in the streets, progressing, and that's a lot more than I thought it would be. So I'm very pleased with that and very grateful. I am concerned, though, like lots of other people around here, about the position in particular of A roads. That new policy that was agreed in November 22, one of the crucial differences between it and the previous Dorset County Council policy was that it didn't have an outright prohibition on A and B roads. That's what the Dorset County Council policy did. That was not included. We had this new criterion taken from the national guidance. And the implication to me was that that meant there would be some A roads that would be included in the 20-mile-an-hour policy. And I mean, I have a local ward interest, the A354 from Portland to the rest of the world, goes through a little village called White Regis in Weymouth. And I think that stretch of that A road could well be 20 miles an hour. Now, questions. Number one, all of the ones that have now been agreed, there's no A roads in any of them, as far as I know. Yeah. What about the 6 that are progressing? I don't think there are any A roads in those. No. So it does look to me as though we're going into a policy where there's effectively a ban on A roads, the same sort of concern that Councillor Somper had. I wonder whether we've got the interpretation of this national guidance correct. And let's take the case of Fontmell Magna. The A350 is a strategic road.
Sorry, thank you. I appreciate you using examples. I'd rather we didn't actually use the names of them. If you can just use the examples. We're dealing with the policy, and I don't want to get into the down into the grass of talk about individual specific places. We need, it's a broad policy is what we need to be looking at.
I'm trying to use this as an example of what I think is wrong with the interpretation of the policy. And it's a bit artificial to use something else. That's the one that's very much in front of us. I'm not using it to argue that the decision on Fontmell Magna is necessarily wrong, but I'm using it as an example to say maybe we are interpreting this policy incorrectly.
Continue. Just be mindful that we are dealing with the policy. Thank you.
The A350 starts somewhere up by the M6 near Chippenham and goes down to Poole Now, it's a strategic route, north to south, between the M6 and Poole. Important road, very important for the movement of motor traffic. When we are considering whether the criterion about the major use of the road being motorised traffic, are we to consider the whole road, in which case it's absolutely clear that's the major purpose of the A350, or are we just to consider the little bit of the road where the 20-mile-an-hour limit is proposed? Now, I think that the sensible thing to do is to think about the little bit where the 20-mile-an-hour limit is proposed, where there is a lot of movement or not of pedestrians, of vulnerable people, of people on bicycles, people with buggies, and all the other things that happen in village centres. And in those cases, you have to balance whether the movement of the through traffic and the small delays that the through traffic will get by going at 20 miles an hour is outweighed by the interests of all those people who are using the village centre. And I think it's important also to recognise that is not a technical decision, it is a political decision. It is a conflict of different interests. The interests of the motorists who don't want to waste the extra minute that it might take them to go through, with the interests of the people who live in these places. And I hope that the answer to my question is this is interpreted locally. It is not interpreted for the whole road. But I'm going to stop there because I'd like some response on this point.
Thank you, Councillor Heatley. Mr. Burden.
Yeah, I guess the comment I'd like to make on that is first of all, Mr. Heatley, absolutely each location is taken on its merits. And without talking about a particular location, absolutely, if the request is in relation to a certain stretch of the road, shall we say, the fact that it's still the strategic road network is relevant. However, we would consider that obviously what the application relates to, in other words, that stretch of half mile, 600 metres, whatever the application is. There is no outright, the policy doesn't say it can't be A and B roads. I know this is quite a nuanced point, but to go back to my original answer, we can consider it on those other roads, but where there has to be clear evidence of high levels of pedestrian and cycle movement, or there is a potential for high levels of pedestrian and cycle movement if there was a 20-mile limit introduced. So, yes, each location by location basis it will be considered on. So I don't know if that really helps.
Yes, okay, it's location by location. Let me put the question differently. Can you conceive of circumstances where an A road might have a 20-mile-an-hour limit? Because it's beginning to look to me like you can't.
Mr. Wiltshire.
Thank you, Chair. Jack Wiltshire, Head of Highways for Dorset Council. Councillor Heatley, you make some very good points. We absolutely are not excluding A roads from a policy. And as you surmised, A roads and B roads are certainly within scope. One of the examples which has gone through is Langton Travers. That is a B road. Originally, looking at guidance, there could be a lot of cases to say that a B road such as that would not be in scope. But one of the main reasons for its being in scope is because there is actually an A road running parallel to that B road. So when you look at those individual locations, there are often alternative routes which may well have a strategic level of importance. And we have looked wider than this when we've been trying to benchmark with our neighbours and other areas in the southwest. So particularly with Cornwall, who have been heralded as examples of putting in place 20-mile-per-hour roads. Cornwall have put in place a 20-mile-per-hour road on an A road. But when you look at that in the greater context, parallel to that, there's the A30, which is a more significant strategic road. So A road's absolutely in scope, but we need to look at the wider context and see what other parallel routes are involved with it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Heatley, did you wish to come back?
You're saying that we'll have an A road within the 20-mile-an-hour scheme if there's an alternative. And I'm not sure that that quite meets my point. I think an A road should be in a 20-mile-an-hour scheme if we consider that the loss of time for the people who are in cars and lorries and so on and so forth is worth sacrificing compared to the benefits of the people who live on that road and the pedestrians and everything else. And I want to know whether, in principle, you're ever going to make the judgment that the motorists might go a little bit slower.
Mr. Wiltshire.
Thank you. This goes back to, again, the interpretation of the DFT's guidance, which we note is 2013 guidance, so it is now just over a decade old. We were told in the plan for drivers that 20-mile-per-hour areas would be, or the guidance for that would be reviewed. The paper at the moment takes into account the current guidance, which is the 2013 guidance, and it would be, I think, something we need to wait for the extra guidance from the DFT to come out before that next level is taken for interpretation.
Okay, I don't think I can take this bit any further. I've got one or two other questions, but others may want to come in.
I would suggest, Councillor, that you take up the conversation with the officers outside of the room if you're still not satisfied. I would suggest you take the conversation up with the officers outside of the room if you're still not satisfied. Thank you.
I just want to look at my list and check whether there's anything else I want to ask.
Councillor Gorringe.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Gorringe, St Leonard's, St Ives and Moores Valley. My question is, as we wish to keep all our children safe outside schools, could we have a blanket 20-mile-an-hour speed limit outside all Dorset schools?
I think we were looking forward to potentially that being a recommendation from this committee, but Mr. Burden, did you want to add anything to that?
I'm not sure I can add too much. Obviously, that's a decision for the committee to make in relation. But as far as implementation is concerned, then, as I said previously, the current policy would any application that relates has school within its application. It is a high priority for us already.
Thank you. Councillor Orange, satisfied? Thank you. Okay, could just move to page 13 at 3.1, 3.2. Just to get an understanding about our communications team and how we've rolled this policy out within the council. How many hits has that site received from the public? Are we getting the message across? I appreciate you might not have that answer immediately to your fingertips, but it'd be good to get an understanding whether the officer team are content with the fact that we are getting the message out there into the wider public domain. And I would also say, just for the public's benefit, is there somewhere where they can find a list of all the applications that have come in for transparency? Thank you.
Yes, I don't have that analytical data in relation to how many hits. I could get that for you. There's no problem. I think in relation to the feedback that we've received on the different social media platforms, I think it's fair to say it's hit that engagement level, but I will certainly get that analytical data for you. And in relation to all the applications, we do have a 20-mile-an-hour website. At the moment, that's only got the phase 1 on there, and I propose to update it further after this committee meeting.
Thank you. Okay, if I can move to page 14 at 5.1 within the report. It's quite a process that's gone through there with a lot of teams involved. I'm just wondering whether or not that can be streamlined. Is it working? It seems quite complicated with potential for schemes slipping through the net with so many different teams coming to it.
The highway service is quite a complex beast. It truly is. It may seem complicated, and I did want to make the point of highlighting all the different arms of the department, but it surprisingly does work quite well. Yes, my team and myself take a leading role with regards to community-led applications, so they will come into the road safety team and they will be assessed. But certainly when it comes to that conversation we had about schools, then we work very closely with our colleagues, the active travel officer, for example, and the school safety officers, and they all come under the transport planning team. I also work very closely with the highways development team, who are responsible for that liaison with the developers, builders for new developments. So it may appear that there are lots of moving parts without a doubt, but yes, it works okay. It doesn't mean there's a lot of liaison. I'm not too sure straight away off the top of my head as to how we could potentially or would necessarily need to change any of the processes. And then when it gets to the delivery stage, then yes, we need to liaise with our sign shop and our traffic regulation team. So yes, there are lots of individuals involved in the process, but there is a structure to it, and it does make sense.
Thank you. As you say, yeah, planning and highways is quite a complicated and complex beast. I appreciate that. On the paper, it's written down in front of you. It does seem quite a process going on behind the scenes. And I appreciate we're some 16 months in, I think, aren't we now? So it was just, I wondered how this approach, how well it was working, but presumably about 16-month period, you've tweaked it behind the scenes, the officers have tweaked it, and you've got it to a point where you're satisfied that it's working really well. And the oversight group, the 20-mile-per-hour panel, is effectively doing a scrutiny piece on the other teams, keeping that overwatch. Would that be a fair comment to make? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It wouldn't be appropriate for just one single officer to make those decisions, hence the reason the development of the panel group to give that oversight. Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate you can't answer this, but because that 20-mile-an-hour panel seems to be fulfilling a scrutiny role in some form or another, and I wonder whether an approach is to be maintained, then should a scrutiny member sit on that panel so they can report back directly to scrutiny, whether that would help to streamline things and get onto problems or issues if they evolve, and we can get onto that quickly. Just it's a thought to be taken away.
Yes, very happy to take that away. As you say, it's a new policy. And the approach I've taken is absolutely, if there's ways that we can do things different, if there's other people we need to include in the process, then I'm very happy to consider that.
Thank you. Councillor Heatley.
Thank you, Chair. I'd quite like to go on to the other two main criteria. One of them, the one that says that essentially the expressions of interest have to come from town and parish councils, I want to say I entirely support. I wouldn't want us to go down the road that Cornwall or Wales are going of doing this in a blanket way. That's partly because I think we need to get more things generally down to parish and town councils. So that part of the scheme I really like. Can I come on to the third of the three main criteria? The one that says if your average speeds are above 24 miles per hour, you can't have it. This seems to me to be utterly perverse in that people go out enthusiastically on speed watch, hoping that this is going to get them 20-mile-an-hour limits in their village centre or whatever. And they see people going through fast and they say, oh, we've got the evidence now. And of course, the result is that the worse the problem is, the faster the traffic is going, the less likely they are to get a 20-mile-an-hour limit. Now, I find this bizarre. I think you should consider adding to that criterion something that says if the speeds are below 24 miles per hour on average, yes, that's fine. But also, if high speeds are making that village centre or whatever dangerous, you will consider a 20 mile per hour limit. It just would be altogether less perverse if it were not that the faster the traffic, the existing traffic is going, the less likely you are to get a 20 mile per hour limit. Do you have a response to that?
Well, first of all, Councillor Hickey, I would say that the policy doesn't say if it's your speeds are over 24 miles, you won't get it. It doesn't say that. The policy says that mean speeds above 24 miles an hour are likely to require additional traffic management or enforcement measures. So we would need to consider, and part of those new applications, we've looked at opportunities such as new signage, speed indicator device, community speed watch that allow us to, those additional measures to allow us to ensure that it meets the policy. I get your point in relation to the speeds, and within those applications we've got that there are locations that do have a higher than 24 miles an hour, but there are mitigations to try and address that. It's really important that we don't want to be criminalising the public by putting in inappropriate speed limits. There's got to be real consistency around speeds, and therefore I think it's really just that really important point. It does make clear that other additional highway measures may be required, and we need to consider it. So it's not a blanket. When we do a survey, if it's above 24, we don't knock it on the head at that stage. We will then look at what measures can we take to implement this 20 miles an hour.
Councillor Heatley, did you wish to come back?
Well, I'll just come back to say that the additional measures are likely to be traffic calming of some kind or other, for which basically we don't have the money at the moment. So it doesn't go anywhere, that route. Anyway, I've had my ritual protest about that particular criterion. Can I just finish by saying I think it's a wonderful irony that the one scheme that you have imposed from the top happens to be in my ward. And I'm highly grateful for it, even though we didn't ask for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heatley. Okay, if I can move on. Page 15 at 5.3, and a year on from phase 1 applications are still not in place. This doesn't appear to be a fast enough approach. Is this because the internal process was still being worked up? Now, we know that as councillors, as officers sat here, the speed of local government is on a different space and time continuum, perhaps to the rest of the world, because we have to be scrutinise our processes to such a degree, because we're dealing with the public purse. But is part of the reason why the applications have taken so long to be brought forward and put in place we were still working up the processes internally within the council once the policy was approved? And do we envisage that things are going to speed up as we move forward, as we become more accustomed and used to putting these applications together and getting the works in place?
Thank you, Chair. It's a very sensible point to raise, particularly, I think, because when we were first mooting this, one of the questions we had from members of the public was, why can't we just get some 20-mile-an-hour stickers and put them over the 30-mile-an-hour signs? And the reason we can't do that, and the reason we do need to make sure we get the legal side of this right, is so that we can enforce. We don't want to have schemes in place which the police can't enforce against. Essentially, it needs to have teeth, it needs to be able to operate properly. And we need to make sure that when we say that a 20-mile-an-hour zone is, or speed limit is appropriate for a traffic regulation order, it is. That said, we have now gone through this process and we think we can streamline it marginally, but it's not going to be drastically reduced. With the sort of timescales we're thinking about at the moment are broadly right.
Thank you, Mr. Wiltshire. Yeah, there has to be an assurance around it. The policy has to work, but you appreciate the question has to be asked within the public domain so the public have an understanding of what the council has to deal with when it sets up these 20-mile-an-hour areas. Thank you. It notes in the report at page 16 at 5.7 and I appreciate you might not have the answer, but it says interest from communities. But what level of interest have we had and how many? Do we have that on record?
Sorry, how many other...
At page 16 at 5.7, it states that we've had interest from communities, but at what level of interest and how many? And I think it's around, it was around within housing development areas, wasn't it? Already existing housing development areas.
I can only answer generally with regards to the policy. So there were 25, since the introduction of policy, there's been 25 formal applications and then 24 other locations that have clearly expressed an interest. Now, there may be lots of other conversations that are going on at local parish town council level, but as far as engagement with the road safety team and myself, then there's 24 other locations that I would say are actively considering 20 miles an hour.
Thank you. And another at page 16 of 5.7, and it's just to get it out there again into the public domain, around our planning officers are fully conversant with the new policy and its potential inclusion in the new planning applications. Planning is such a massive department within this island, with the 7th biggest planning authority in the country. Are the officers between your teams and planning, is there that dialogue going on so that they are fully conversant with their abilities now with developer, particularly on new developer sites, that they can have these put in place, because it comes from developer contributions, doesn't it?
Yes, you'd be reassured the fact that the development team sit very closely here at County Hall with me, and we have very close liaison on 20 mile an hour schemes, yes.
Again, for the public's benefit, it was interesting to see at page 17 at 5.9 there's been an increase within speed watch teams involving how, and I just wondered if we knew how many teams there were and involving how many volunteers have been created, and whether there is a list of all the places who have one. I think this is part of the work that can be done through Dorset Council and DAPTC to encourage that. I think some places have had difficulty in getting those volunteers coming forward, and it would appear from what is in your report that you obviously have a knowledge around that. It would be good if that could be imparted. I wonder if you could give any more on the figures involved.
I can't give exact figures, Chair. It's important to emphasise Dorset Police operate the community speed watch scheme. So whilst Dorset Police have very close liaison with us, I don't have those exact figures, but I do know off the back of the policy that the police have notified us that they've had an increased interest from local villages and communities around setting up a new community speed watch, but I don't have those figures, so I could get them for you.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciative of that. Okay, if we go to page 18 at 5.10, the 20 mile per hour toolkit for DC members and town and parish councils. At page 27, pedestrian tips, one of which is listen. And I couldn't see anywhere in the report that dealt with electric cars that run silently. And I just wondered whether the officers want to give some thought to that in future with that toolkit, because I think that does have an impact on visually impaired pedestrians.
I think that's a fair point, Chair, so I will review that toolkit.
I think it's strange to me anyway, and I'm sure it is to other people, that electric cars were developed without any sound whatsoever. And I think even people with good hearing and without any visually impairment sometimes can get caught out with electric cars. Thank you. If we go to page 18, at 6.3, a confirmation that the police enforcement is only going to take place where there is a continued risk, presumably based around collision data collected. Would I be right in thinking that?
Sorry, can you expand on that, Chair? Sorry.
Certainly, yeah. So at page 18 at 6.3, it seems to be a confirmation that police enforcement is only going to take place where there is a continued risk, presumably based around collision data collected by the police. Would I be right in thinking that? I don't think they have the budget or the resources to be able to enforce every 20 mile an hour area that we're going to be putting in.
Yeah, obviously it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on Dorset Police operational decisions, but what they've advised us is, yes, as this is nothing new, then obviously off the back of the collision data and intelligence that they're receiving, be that through the injury collision data or the non-injury collision data, they will be looking to task their officers at locations where clearly there's concerns around collisions, and that's where they would prioritise first. They also will prioritise around complaints made by the public as well.
Thank you. Page 19 at 7.3, the non-injury reporting system, and the police obviously have it reported to them. I just wonder how much that costs to implement each year, and is it best use the council budget, as well as what is reported to the police and hospital admission records? Do we have access to insurance claims to establish that data?
Presently, as explained in the report, the police are only required to report personal injury collisions to us, and that's a standard procedure that is for all local authorities, and that works well. Because we don't have the non-injury collision data or near miss, we have a website on the Dorset Council website where people can self-report. So there isn't a significant cost to us. Those reports are automatically generated once a member of the public has reported us, and that gets sent to us, and then is an overlay on the data map. In relation to non-injury collision data, this is an issue that we have discussed with the police, and they are looking at their procedures to see whether or not they could enhance their reporting to us so that it becomes standard that they report the non-injury data to us. I think that's really important because a piece of work that we've done has identified that more than half of all collisions that occur within the county and are reported to police are actually non-injury. So that is a significant piece of data that we're not getting notified of at this moment in time. So that's a piece of work that's going on within the partnership at the moment.
Yeah, it did seem quite a significant issue to me that there was such a black hole, as it were, within the data that we've collected. But you're confident then that we are progressing that to find a better way of doing it?
I think certainly the argument has been made and agreed. I think there are some challenges for Dorset Police as to how they would administer that. It's not a straightforward process. When reports come into the police, they can come in by different ways. So, for example, it could be a report of a drink driver that results in a collision being recorded, or it could be a report of an animal on a road that results in a non-injury collision. At the moment, their systems, it requires a lot of human interaction to gather that information out from their systems. Clearly, that's not something that is really sustainable in the long term. So they're looking at their process to see, is there more streamlined process to gather that information? So I'm happy that is a piece of work that sits within the partnership. It's recognised by all partners that it's important, and we are expecting an update soon from Dorset Police around this.
Thank you. Page 20 at 9.1, the phase 1 schemes. There's 5 schemes that I think what we've budgeted for was 75,000, didn't we, for the 5 schemes? And we're going to be over by 50,000 over budget. Are you able to establish where that additional money is going to come from? Is it covered? That was Section 151 officer here.
Yes, so for this financial year, we have 75,000, and as you say, the phase 1 applications are up to 25,000. So clearly, we've got sufficient money in the budget for this financial year. The money that's outstanding for this financial year can be rolled over into the next financial year. So we have more funds available to do more next year.
So, good morning, Chair. So, Matthew Piles, Director of Highways and Planning. So, just to reassure you, we do work very closely together. I think this is for the future, for where the LTP funding is actually allocated. Road safety is the core part of the highway service. Everything we do is road safety focused. And I think it's a discussion that myself and Councillor Brown are aware of the public's interest in 20-mile-an-hour zones and also the school streets, which are slightly different because it stops vehicles going through there rather than maintaining them. So I think this is one to be discussed, future highway maintenance policy and future funding. Other councils have to flex their funding. I'd love to flex the money that I have, but I have more asks than I have the money to fund them at the present moment. So this is a future budgetary discussion.
Okay. So, Councillor Gorringe.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, talking about costs, and I mentioned about having a blank policy outside all schools. How much, if we went down that road, what do we have any idea what the cost would be to have 20 mile an hour scheme outside all schools?
To the guests of this committee, there's a lot of schools. It's fair to say, Councillor Gomes, there'll be a lot of money, a lot at high expense.
Councillor Gorringe, it's a fair point. Maybe that would be one of the recommendations for the officers to take away to work up a future cost scheme for that, which might give Mr. Piles some sleepless nights. But Mr. Piles.
Just to add, Chair, I think you'd have to judge every school on its merit, so go back to what the policy is trying to achieve. But also, I'm very keen to look at how the school streets will impact Dorset Council schools, the school streets pilot projects, and also most of the schools in Dorset are academy status as well. So there's a lot of discussions that we would have to have with the academies and the local community. So go back to Councillor Heatley's point, I think there's a lot more work to be done on this very emotive subject. So I think it's right for us to go away and actually come back to a future committee with some of those points that you've made.
Thank you, Mr. Piles. Yeah, I think it would be worth getting some sort of cost exercise on it, because should all the schools come forward, or the parishes come forward to say, well, we'd like a 20 mile an hour zone of some description outside of their schools, then we need to be prepared for that, I would suggest. I think Mr. Dunn would appreciate having a heads up on that. Thank you. Councillor Gorringe, are you happy with that?
Yeah, just to add to that, if Dorset Council doesn't have the money, then perhaps parish councils and town councils could be approached to make a contribution.
I think that is within the policy. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So if we move to page 22 at 10.2, the 20 mile per hour air quality reduced emissions, that you give a very good informative note within the report. And I take it from that there is no definitive answer on this. I'm just getting this out into the public domain because it is obviously a question that gets asked a lot by the public as to whether 20 mile an hour zones will impact on our air quality, on climate. But it would appear from what is contained within the report, it is just too difficult to quantify, really, depending on the engine, driver behaviour and such like. So just get that confirmation within the public domain, please.
Certainly, Chair. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Byron.
Very interesting point you raised, Chairman, because as recently as last week, I was asking our sustainability team for as much information as we can get as to whether there is an increase in emissions as we reduce the speeds. The data is so out of date that I can't give you a definite answer, but what I can say to you is it's something we need to push on because the Road Haulage Association have made it very clear that the lower the speed of the vehicle, the more likely the emissions and certainly the consumption of fuel goes up quite dramatically. But trying to get the up-to-date data, and I think the data we've got is 2022 or 2021. So obviously a lot's happened since then. But we will continue to try and get the data so that at a future date, when it comes back to this scrutiny committee, we can give you that detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it is hugely complex. Councillor Heatley.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's important to look at emissions as a whole, and probably the main effect of the 20 mile an hour policy are the journeys that people used to make in a car, but which they will now walk or go on a bicycle or whatever. It's that displacement effect, which I'm sure is much more important than the slow and inefficient speeds of some vehicles. But I'm not sure. But it's very important to remember that effect is there as well.
Thank you, Councillor Heatley. I'm content. Okay, any other questions? Councillor Trite.
Thank you, Chairman. I have very little to add to the learned comments that I've heard so far. Certainly on the last point by Councillor Bryan, it's just a matter of who you choose to believe. But Councillor Heatley's point is not to be ignored in that, because the lower the speeds, obviously the more people are likely not to feel they have to use their cars for local journeys. Anyway, what I would say is that on the whole, I believe the council's policy in respect of 20 miles an hour is reasonable under the guidance and under the present circumstances. The key word for me is proportionate, whereby each location for which 20 is proposed is dealt with on its own merits. Apart from that, the only thing I'd like to draw attention to is the proposal by Councillor Jane Somper earlier that this committee meets again specifically to consider the need for 20 miles an hour on certain A roads. We've heard from the representative of Fontmell Magna Parish Council, and one only has to drive through Fontmell Magna to realise that is a serious accident just waiting to happen. And so I would suggest that the committee treats that proposal from Councillor Somper as a priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Trite. Do I have any other questions from members? Councillor Heatley.
Yes, just to say I would support that.
Thank you. Okay, so if we're all done, we've got a few recommendations and points to bring forward. So we had a recommendation to change the policy to automatic 20 mile an hour speed limits around schools, or at least for officers to look closely at that. And also the around costs for those school sites that be explored. Councillor Wiltshire.
A point of clarification, my understanding was that was around school street sites rather than specifically school street. Sorry, just entirely schools. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Wiltshire. Yes. Explore the possibility of a scrutiny member sitting on the 20 mile per hour panel to report back. And also to look at the 20 mile per hour toolkit concerning electric cars and their silent running operation, just to give us some more assurance around that. And Ms. Watson, did you have any others? I think I missed a couple.
Only, Chairman, there was just the point raised about the committee considering 20 mile an hour on certain A roads and looking at that at a future meeting.
Thank you. So if we're all done, Mr. Burden, and thank you for an excellent report. Thank you for that. And Mr. Wiltshire, thank you for the input that you've had as well. And to Councillor Bryan, portfolio holder. Thank you. Okay, thank you, members. Okay, let's move on. Okay, members, we'll move on to agenda item 8, Redlands Leisure and Community Park update. The recommendation is that the committee notes and comments on the information provided in the report, and the presenting officer will be Mr. Paul Rutter, Service Manager for Leisure and Arts and Cultural Services, and the portfolio holder is Councillor Beddoe for Culture and Communities. So, Mr. Rutter, if you can present your report, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And just to repeat, I'm Paul Rutter, Service Manager for Leisure, Arts and Cultural Services. This report today is to provide an update on the Redlands Community and Sports Facility in Weymouth on the back of Active Dorset taking over the lease from Weymouth College back in November 2022. I think it's quite important to sort of reflect on the background as to how we've got to this position and the changes in operating model moving forward. So the Redlands was previously operated by Weymouth College on a long lease. Unfortunately, it was costing the college around £200,000 a year to subsidise that facility. They didn't receive any external leisure grants, so it was purely being funded through the college. Clearly, that was unsustainable for the college, and they back in 2021 they approached the council with a view to seeing if they could identify or find a new operator to take over the lease from them. So the council were happy for the college to explore that option, and as a result of that, they went out for expressions of interest to the local marketplace to see if they could find a new operator. They received one bid, and that was from Active Dorset. Active Dorset are a active sports partnership, one of 43 across the country. They're funded by Sport England, and their primary objective is to try and encourage individuals and groups to be more physically active. So decision was taken for them to take over the lease. However, their original submission and plan was to just take over the outdoor facilities at the site and to not operate the indoor facilities, as they didn't feel that it was sustainable moving forward. They're also keen to further develop the site, improve additional 3G all-weather pitch and recreational facilities for walking and play, as well as also looking to introduce a new community cafe and soft play. So that was their original plan. As you can appreciate, the likely closure of the indoor facilities was of concern to the local community, and the council, alongside Weymouth College and Active Dorset and Weymouth Town Council, all came together to discuss this further with the local community to try and identify a way forward whereby the indoor facilities could also remain open. So Active Dorset reviewed this. They came up with a new operating model, one that was going to be heavily supported by the community. So they've introduced a key holder operating model whereby community groups actually take responsibility for the site during their occupation, and they'll literally can open the building and close the building at night. The centre is still staffed at certain times during the day, but it's not staffed in the way that the facility was the same staff levels that were previously undertaken by Weymouth College. But that's what enabled it to be more affordable and sustainable moving forward. One of the issues when the Active Dorset took over the new lease in November 22 was around the facility itself. So there was a long list of repairs and maintenance that needed to be carried out. As part of the exit agreement with Weymouth College, funds were made available to enable those works to take place. So over the last 15, 16 months, there's been an ongoing programme of improvements to the site. The key thing was to make the building watertight, so address roofing repairs and such like. But there's also been improvements to lighting, to sports hall floors, and a number of other things. So in terms of how it's going, shall we say, as in terms of our update, clearly the community have got behind the centre, and that was something that was really key. So when we moved forward on this proposal, it was very much a case of the community needing to step up and play a more active part, but also to use the facilities. Pleased to say that numbers have increased since Active Dorset have taken over the site. There's a number of new groups and sessions that have been introduced. So NHS sessions on rehabilitation have been introduced. The centre is available for individuals to come along and partake in sessions. And it's also, as I say, being managed by a number of different groups using the facilities. I mentioned some improvements. So Active Dorset are currently moving forward on looking to improve the existing 3G and also to bring forward a new 3G. So they're in discussions with the council and external funding bodies, and that's looking very, very promising. So it's anticipated that some new facilities could come forward in 2025. There's also the community cafe that's been introduced. The plan was for it to be opened through the sort of summer of 23, but with a number of building repair issues needing to be undertaken first, the facility has opened in January of this year, and also a soft play area has been introduced. That's seeing around 50 to 100 visitors every day in the very short spell that it's been opened. I mentioned the community engagement and support. The community have very much got on board with the new operating model. They all book their sessions online and pay online. They're looking after the facilities. There's 20 volunteers now that are actively engaged at the site. Some of those are working as part of the cafe team, but there's also volunteers that are coming in doing painting and decorating, amongst other things. And there's one individual volunteer that actually comes into the centre every night with his dog and walks around and actually checks that everything is secure and safe. So very, very commendable example of community volunteering there. As I say, in terms of finance, when Active Dorset first took over the site, they produced a forecast budget over 8 years. That was very much based on the information that they'd been provided by Weymouth College and making a number of assumptions. So, clearly it's quite difficult to actually do that unless you're actually on the site and operating it. The reason for the 8-year forecast was there was the expectation that it would run at a loss for the first few years, whilst new facilities came on board, such as the community cafe and soft play, and hopefully in future years the 3G facilities. So the aim is by sort of 25, 26, hopefully it will be cost neutral. So although there is a cost this year, it's actually been halved from what it was when Weymouth College were previously operating the facility. So Dorset Council has set aside a budget for this year, and pleased to say that the budgeted overspend for 23-24 is comfortably within that budget has been set aside. So I'd really sort of summarise by saying it's a really good example of partnership working. It was difficult for Weymouth College to make it sustainable. The council, Weymouth Town Council, with their £35,000 a year contribution towards this as well, have come forward. Active Dorset, the community, have listened to try and come up with an operating model that can work and can be sustainable. And after 16 months, it's still early days. There's still challenges ahead. Certainly things like the utilities and such like have been a challenge for Active Dorset over the last year or so. But signs are looking positive. They're on a upward projection, and it's really pleasing that the community are playing an active role and are using the facility. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rutter. Councillor Beddoes, portfolio holder, do you wish to make a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, Councillor Laura Beddoes, Cabinet Member for Culture and Communities. Paul has summed it up really well. This is a really good news story. I would say that all the partners involved, Active Dorset, Dorset Council, the college, Weymouth Town Council, all the partners involved have worked incredibly hard on this. It's not been easy. But although we've worked incredibly hard on it, I think that the real thanks has to go to the people that have supported this and really got involved. And I think initially there was a degree of scepticism, probably quite rightly, from the general public and local residents who kind of thought, oh, okay, national picture of things closing, we're going to lose something. And actually their willingness to be open-minded and to come forward and work with the council, with our partners, with Active Dorset, and actually create something for themselves, I think is really, really, really good news. So I haven't got anything else to say, really happy to take comments, and I think this is something that is a good model and could be used elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beddoes. Without going into it, I'm very pleased to hear that last comment for obvious reasons. Okay, so members, just come to the first question, page 35 at 1.3 to 1.6. How much financial contribution did Weymouth Technical College make for future maintenance and work improvements that needed to be carried out? It wasn't actually in the report. We've had a discussion around the fact that Weymouth Town Council is making significant contributions through grant for the next couple of years with 35,000, but nothing in there on what Weymouth Technical College contributed to it as they surrendered it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As I said, there were condition survey works that were undertaken by Dorset Council's surveying team, which identified a list of works that needed to be completed. In terms of the exit agreement and costs with the council, that equated to around about £500,000 for those works to be undertaken. In addition to that, there was also a requirement for the college to create a sinking fund for the replacement of the existing 3G pitch. So there was also a £250,000 payment for the replacement of the pitch. So in total, there was £750,000.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? Councillor Heatley.
Not a question, Chair. As a Weymouth member and as a user of Redlands, I'm just want to thank Councillor Beddoes in particular for effectively making what looked like a very grim situation a year or two ago turn into such a success. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, page 35 at 1.5 to 1.6. Do you have an understanding of what budget has been set aside by Dorset Council for the next 30 years lifetime of the lease and how much has been spent to date?
So in terms of the lease, Active Dorset submitted a 8-year budget forecast with the expectation that by the end of the 8-year period there would be a £24,000 surplus. From that point onward, Dorset Council will not be providing any additional funds. It will be the responsibility of Active Dorset. So the only financial support at the moment is essentially revenue support through these first few years, but that will balance out over the 8-year period, and also the investment of the funds from Weymouth College to make the building fit and safe and fit for purpose.
Thank you. So we're expecting it to wash its face in future years then. Thank you. We made reference just now to the condition survey, and at page 35, 2.1, were officers happy with that condition survey, or did it bring up any further surprises that have come to light after the survey was done?
In terms of the exit agreement and the payments, that there is some allocation of contingency within those funds. So whilst inevitably there will be some small things that will come up, most of the what I'd class as the big ticket items are coming through and coming in on budget.
So principally officers were happy with the survey that was done. Thank you. Okay, so if I go to page 36 at 2.5, I'm assuming from that surrounding the particularly the shower units that we're looking to change, that's already been basically that's already going to be covered with the budget monies that you've already got that are in the programme.
Yeah, that's correct.
So if I move to page 36 at 3.3. Could you go into a bit more detail about how the operational works around that is occurring? It's around the self-service and booking system. If you could just put some flesh on the bones for that, for an understanding for us and for the public.
Yeah, so in terms of whether it be group bookings would be through an online management system. So there's no handing over of cash at site, shall we say. So that's all managed offline, and similarly individuals can pay for individual sessions through that. In terms of the key code access, that's just around alarms and setting the system, and there's a good CCTV system, and I believe the operator can also set the alarms from afar, so they can override the system.
Thank you. That was good to hear that explanation. Thank you. So, yeah, in the report, page 36, 3.5, do we have a breakdown of month-on-month increase of user attendance and in what areas? I mean, it all seems to be moving in the right direction. It would be nice to have an understanding about how that attendance increased. My understanding is from what you've intimated within the report is that actually there's far more user of the facility by the public than we had previously.
Yeah, just to sort of illustrate that, I mean, clearly the operating model is slightly different, but in terms of the period of September through till December 2023, there was a 31% increase on the same period the previous year. So we're looking around about a 30% increase on across the board. Cricket in particular has returned and has began to grow, which is positive. I've also talked about pickleball. So just to give you some context there, around about 120 courts a week are being booked out for those sessions, which is clearly really positive. And also some more group bookings. So, for example, NHS rehabilitation group. So they will run the sessions themselves, but they'll hire the facilities from Active Dorset. So there's new bookings as well, which is positive.
Confirmation. Did you say 120 courts being booked a week? Was that?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you. 30% increase, that's huge. Councillor Beddoe, you wish to make a comment?
Just on that point, Chair, that Paul's just replied and responded to, I think it probably would also be true to say that because the group bookings, we've put in 3.5 greater club commitment, I think it would be true to say that clubs feel more like it's their home. And that may contribute to some of the increase in numbers because they're not hiring a facility to have their sessions in. A lot of the clubs, I think, feel that this is actually their home, their club's home. I follow a few of the groups on social media, and the tone that they talk about Redlands in is this is our place. So I'm really heartened by that.
Thank you. Page 36, 3.6. It's interesting that the NHS rehabilitation is being done on site. Is this the first time it's occurred here? And what are the numbers and how many NHS practitioners are involved? We're obviously interested as a council that early intervention, that mental health and well-being, and the dividends that brings later in life, and then certainly increases potential future costs for the council. So I'd be interested to have a bit more detail around that, please.
I don't have those details available now, but I can certainly find them out for you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the committee would appreciate to see those figures. Okay, if we go to page 37 at 3.9, the report seems to indicate that there is a considerable additional income to the financial position in 2025-26 due to the 2 3G pitches. Appendix 1, page 43 at 7, states that there's an under-provision of 3G pitches in the area. Is this situation thought to continue for the foreseeable future? Because obviously part of the finance business structure with Active Dorset is reliant on the fact that they will have the provision of 3G pitches within the area without, I would imagine, too much competition. I just wondered if we have an understanding about that in terms of the future strategy of the area.
Yeah, in terms of the Dorset playing pitch strategy and the Dorset football strategy, both of them support the need for an additional full-size 3G pitch for Weymouth. Redlands was identified as the priority site for that. The sports sorry, my mind's gone. The Football Foundation have been really engaged from an early stage, really keen for these new facilities to be brought on board. So there's some really positive discussions about that, and we're currently, or Active Dorset are currently at the stage of applying for planning as part of that scheme.
Thank you. So if we go to page 38 at 4, Active Dorset, through no fault of their own, obviously have been hit with some issues that have affected their financial planning. The advice from the Section 151 officer appears to be positive within the report moving forward, and with the future full of unknowns, do or will Dorset Council financial team provide ongoing support and advice to ensure that what appears to be a real success story in the community will not be jeopardised or put at risk? So basically it's how much support we're going to be giving them in the future.
As part of the agreement for Active Dorset to take over the running of the site, as I said previously, there was the 8-year forecast, but it was certainly on the basis that the council would support Dorset, active Dorset through those early years. Yes, the report does show a few unknowns, in particular around things such as property rates, and also we've had some very, very high energy and utility costs, but hopefully those levels are starting to slowly go down. And I think based on the income levels that they're generating, they're generating enough income to overcome the small issues that they've encountered in terms of their costs. So at the moment, it's looking positive, and we will continue to monitor it. So we meet with them regularly as part of the management agreement. We'll continue to monitor and hopefully support them where we need. But hopefully that's not going to be the case, and they're going to be sustainable moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Rutter. Okay, members, any further comments from the committee? No, I think we're looking at what appears to be an extremely successful operation thus far. I think with Active Dorset, with the community and those community groups that have come forward, and with Dorset Council playing its part in enabling that, are we content as a community to congratulate those parties involved? I think it is a really good success story for the area. So we could have so easily have lost that facility. And obviously, as I've already said, it has terrific implications for the council going forward in terms of that health and well-being and that early intervention enabling that. I'm really pleased to see that NHS practitioners are doing a rehabilitation there as well, which I think is a really good news story. So members in agreement, if we pass that on, a thank you to Active Dorset and to the community as a whole for getting behind that facility and insurance continue, and congratulations to the officers and the portfolio holder for the work they've done as well in enabling that facility. It's a really good news story. Thank you. Ms. Watson, I don't think we had any recommendations that come out of that other than a congratulations to all concerned. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rutter. Thank you, Councillor Beddoe. Okay, if we move to agenda item 9, which is the grid capacity review. And the members will remember that this was the Scrutiny Task and Finish group that was done that come out of part of our peer review as new ways of working. So this effectively has been a scrutiny committee that has looked at this topic. The recommendation to submit the recommendations of the Grid Capacity Task and Finish Group within Section 4 of the report to Cabinet on the Council's future approach to strategic risks and opportunities regarding the electricity network. The presenting officer is Carl Warham, the Climate and Ecology Policy Officer, to present. And also attending we have Mr. Anthony Littlechild, Sustainability Team Manager, Mr. Stephen Ford, Corporate Director for TIDC, and Mr. Piles, Matthew Piles, is a Corporate Director for Economic Growth and Infrastructure, who's still in the room. So if I could ask Mr. Warham to give his report, please. Thank you.
I'm Policy Officer within the Council's Sustainability Team. And as Chairman said, joined to my right by Anthony Littlechild, Sustainability Team Manager. I'm also grateful to be joined by Stephen and Matthew today, both of whom generously gave their time to support this work, so I just wanted to thank them at the outset for that. This report presents the findings of an inquiry undertaken by a task and finish group of this committee looking into the impacts, challenges and opportunities of grid constraints and associated reforms. It overviews the confluence of factors prompting the need to reform how the grid is governed, built and managed, the attendant programme of reform, and a set of recommendations on how the Council can better position itself to exploit the opportunities of such for the benefit of Dorset. Broadly, the report aims to elaborate 3 fundamental points. First, that there is currently a significant strategic challenge regarding the grids, and that this threatens to become more severe as ever more new sources of demand and supply aim to connect. Second, that there is, thankfully, a significant programme of reform underway nationally that promises to help mitigate these challenges. And third, that this presents significant opportunities for the Council to play a more strategic role in the emerging future energy system for the benefit of Dorset. As motivating context, the energy crisis, of course, threw into sharp relief the challenges of the UK's lack of energy self-sufficiency and strengthened national ambition to transition towards a cleaner, more secure and more affordable energy system, with the overarching national ambition to decarbonise the grid by 2035. However, it is clear that there are a range of procedural, regulatory and policy barriers to this, and importantly, whilst discussion of the challenges typically focuses on barriers to deploying renewable generation, there is also a need for fundamental changes to how we store, transport, supply and use energy as well. So in particular, there is a fundamental challenge to ensure that the UK's creaking grid is itself fit for purpose to accommodate new low carbon generation and storage assets, alongside the significant growth in demand for power from the electrification of heat and transport. Indeed, shortcomings in the system have already yielded a heavily constrained grid that has failed to keep pace with the pace of new generation and demand. It is, however, consequently, as I said, now subject to significant national reform, particularly across 2022, 2023 and 2024. Consequently, this was a particularly opportune moment to subject the issue to further exploration. For this reason, committee determined in May that a task and finish group be established to review the issue of grid constraints and to produce a set of recommendations. The inquiry was structured into five sessions, which took place from October to January, and timed to coincide with the expected announcement of major reforms from government and Ofgem. Throughout the sessions, the group heard evidence from a wide range of participants, as shown here, including council officers, renewable developers, retrofitters, housing developers and housing associations, as well as, of course, network companies themselves. The resultant report is, I appreciate, a somewhat lengthy and not necessarily easy read in places, but hopefully serves to both capture the nature of the discussions we held and to act as a primer for those members of the committee who weren't within the subgroup. I will not aim to fully state the content here, but will just give an overview of some of the key points. First is that the challenge cannot be understated. Grid constraints are now commonly cited as the single biggest barrier to decarbonising power, and if unaddressed, its strategic significance is considerable, presenting a drag not just on decarbonisation and energy security, but also potentially on business expansion, development, investment and economic growth. Moreover, this is not just an issue for the future. Local projects already face delays, curtailment or cancellation owing to prohibitive connection costs or grid strengthening delays, and in some cases has impaired project viability entirely. Many local stakeholders reported to us that they were being offered connection times as late as 2036, and many identified the contours of these challenges, telling us of many major and minor renewables, EV charger and building retrofit projects they had underway, which were running into capacity issues. Whilst the extent of the projects facing constraints shouldn't be exaggerated, equally, they are more than a mere irritant to a sizable number of projects, and there is a clear identifiable strategic risk that this could become more severe as ever more new sources of low-carbon supply, storage and demand aim to connect. Just as importantly, however, local stakeholders also endeavoured not just to register their views on the challenge, but to diagnose, but also to give us prescriptions on how the council's potential role in helping to resolve them. So whether through strengthening the evidence base for local network investment need and the strategic planning of the future grid, strengthening our collaboration with network companies, lobbying to expedite upgrades, or better facilitating constraint mitigations like flexibility measures, microgrids, or alternative low-carbon heat sources. Indeed, throughout these discussions and further analysis, diagnosis of the challenges is readily identifiable as inhering in 6 broad problems with the legacy or historic system of grid governance, operation, and regulation. Notably, that until recently, grid development has only occurred piecemeal and reactively in response to demand rather than in anticipation of it, and with a lack of strategic investment to facilitate expanded capacity ahead of need. That this in part owed to the lack of strategic network planning, which could inform decisions on what, where and when to build new grid infrastructure. That policy and processes for connection queuing has led to them being excessively large, driven to a large extent by speculative applications for less viable, non-progressing or zombie projects, which impairs the allocation of even available capacity. that there are inefficiencies and inconsistencies in systems across gas and electric, and weak transparency and accountability in the system for customers and the public, that some strategically significant transmission infrastructure, those which are the major source of 2036 delays, are being delayed by national planning consenting processes, and that national and more local markets to enable the deployment of flexibility services like energy storage or demand-side response measures where customers are incentivised to shift their demand to other times, and which are crucial means to enable the efficient use of available grid capacity, are themselves still relatively immature. Nevertheless, as noted, thankfully the scale of this problem is recognised, and there is a programme of significant but complex regulatory reform being undertaken by government, Ofgem and industry, much of which was released during the latter part of this Task and Finish Group's work. Due to the late arrival of this, we didn't get to explore it much within the sessions beyond our 5th session with the network companies. So I hope that section 9 of the report and its appendix, the appendix to the appendix, provides a useful overview of these for members of the group as well as the wider committee members here. Again, I won't try and elaborate those in full, but I will just mention some key areas of reform. So first, there is clear acknowledgement by government, Ofgem and industry on the need to facilitate much greater anticipatory investment in the network. So in particular, the establishment and iteration of what is called the RIO price controls process has started to better enable this, with the second iteration that commenced in 2023, enabling a doubling of investment in the distribution network compared to the first, and introducing new mechanisms that will unlock more investment if the pace of deployment of EVs and heat pumps requires it. The Council can play a valuable role in helping network companies to further better evidence the case for investment locally in the future. Second, significant new means to facilitate strategic planning are emerging, including the creation of a new network operator, what's called the Future Systems Operator, that will create central to strategic network plans, and, as announced in October, also the establishment of new forms of subnational regional governance, regional energy strategic planners that will create regional plans. These strategic plans are a significant step for better determining investment need, and local authorities will be important presence on these new governance structures, giving the Council a much stronger opportunity to play a more strategic role in the future energy system. This will be critical so that ambition on things like net zero and development better determines where capacity is available rather than being determined by it. And also just to note that positive as this is, the inquiry also heard concerns about the risk that even regional scale plans may lack the granularity and local scale on need, and that there may therefore need to be further efforts to support network companies in providing a robust evidence base on the case for investment at the local scale. We heard that several local authorities have started creating local area energy plans as a result, strategic, granular, i.e. postcode level, cross-vector plans that bring together national and local data sets with local stakeholders to determine decarbonisation pathways for a locality. Whilst there is no formal requirement or statutory role for them presently, they could play an important role. So, as the report notes, Dorset Council will continue to play a central role in the delivery of net zero locally, but alongside our role as a local planning authority and local transport authority, we have a critical strategic interest in the future evolution of the energy system itself. Yet, unlike with transport and development systems which are critically dependent upon energy, we currently play a much more peripheral role in strategically planning the local energy system. This inquiry clearly therefore identified the need for energy infrastructure to be seen through the same lens as other strategic infrastructure, with investment better aligned to local knowledge, ambition and decision making. Our ambitions for net zero development and economic growth will therefore require us to play a much more central role in planning energy systems within the future, and strengthening our collaboration with energy network companies in particular will be essential for this. Moreover, through our engagement with network companies, there is clear willingness from them to strengthen our strategic and operational relationships so that we can better collaborate, innovate and develop capacity and capability. Our work already with SSEN, on its new Lenser geospatial planning tool is already a strong demonstrator of this sort of cooperation. Accordingly, the report makes the following recommendations for this committee to make to Cabinet. To establish regular quarterly strategic meetings with network operators to address strategic challenges and identify areas of collaboration or innovation. And this may also involve brokering or facilitating strategic meetings with key local stakeholder groups like developers. Second, to seize the opportunity of regional energy strategic planners by proactively engaging now to influence their design and implementation and reflecting on how we can most effectively give voice to local stakeholders through them. Third, to strengthen the evidence on local investment needs to support our network operators' case for investment by continuing to pursue a cost-effective route to local area energy planning, building on the opportunities of the Lenser trial. Fourth, to ensure that grid constraints and constraint mitigation measures are well embedded in our strategies, policy and decision-making by better utilising emerging data and tools to inform them. Fifth, to explore the opportunities of Ofgem's Strategic Innovation Fund and our devolution asks to actively develop, trial and deliver new processes, tools and approaches with network operators. And sixth, and finally, to lobby our MPs, government, Ofgem and network operators on any residual issues like expediting key critical transmission infrastructure upgrades, queue prioritisation and customer service improvements. So thanks. That's it from me. I just want to conclude by thanking the Task and Finish group for enduring with this process. I know it was often a bit intense with some marathon 3 or 4 hour sessions on often very technical matters. So thanks for sticking with it, and I hope you appreciate the subsequent gift of a hefty report to read in addition. I hope that it's been a helpful process, and I know that we as officers also learnt a lot throughout it, and it's also been a pleasure working with members in a sustained way on a single issue. So thanks for the committee for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Warren, for an excellent report. I think our thanks should actually go to you for the way you clerked us and steered us through those sessions that we had. It was, as you say, it was quite an eye-opener. Mr. Littlechild, did you have anything you wish to add?
No, nothing at this stage. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Ford, did you have anything you wish to add at this point? No? Thank you. Mr. Piles, did you have anything you wish to add? No? Okay. Councillor Byron.
When we first decided to set up this Task and Finish group, I thought, why are we doing this? But I think what's come out of it is a lot of detail with a lot of input from people. So I'm going to pass my thanks back to you, Chairman, and the committee for asking for this Task and Finish group to be set up. The outcome could be a way forward for not just this council, but for the future council in a few months' time. So, yeah, congratulations to everybody that took part. I had the pleasure of going through this report with Carl a few days ago, and it's raised some questions in my own mind as to the way forward. So, yeah, congratulations to everybody that took part.
Thank you, Councillor Bryan. I knew where I was going with it, so I'd requested it. And I think we were probably the first in the country to do this, I think, on the grid capacity. Mr. Piles.
Sorry, can I add my thanks to Carl and the team? And I will say, Chairman, thank you. I think this is the best bit of scrutiny we've done in Dorset Council since its creation. My concern and worry with my directors of highways and planning hat on is my concern with my director of highways and planning hat on, this is such a big subject that we need to have more influence upon for the future. I will admit that I have learned so much through these 5 to 6 sessions with the complexity of need, the requirement of developers, and the absolute frustration in the system of things being stopped or blocked or not going forward. And we really need to work with our colleagues, not just in Dorset, but the South West and nationally, to lobby to make the system better. Because my biggest frustration is the public don't understand how complicated the system is. And the question asked to me was, why don't you just fix the problem? I can't fix the problem. And there's a real risk to economic growth for Dorset for the future if we don't come together and fix the problem. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, members, I'm going to move to questions from the committee. I don't think I have, no, I haven't got any councillors in the room outside the committee, so I'm going to move to questions from the committee. Councillor Heatley.
Once again, Chair, I'm afraid it's not a question. I was one of the happy few that were on this group, and I can't say I learned an awful lot. It is so immensely complicated and difficult, and it's a problem. My feeling was a problem before we started we didn't even knew that we had. I think what came out of it for me was that the council has got to work out what it wants before it can begin to get into the whole business of lobbying and influencing and so on and so forth. I think the key to that is developing a local energy plan of some kind. I'm frightened of what the resource implications of that are. It's a huge job, but it's at least put this very difficult but incredibly important subject on the table. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any other committee members who wish to speak at this point? No? Okay. So, again, dealing with the report, there's a couple of things that come out of this that I think we would bear in mind with the future council, where we would come to the very close to the end of the term of this council authority and the new one going forward. And I would like to pass some things on that I think, recommendations that I think should be taken into account. One of those is a future webinar to the new council, taking into account the technologies and the future impact on planning and energy provision will be useful to the new councillors. And I think that would be a piece of work going forward that we would need to do. Along with a site visit to the hydrogen plant at Camford, which is something we've talked about for a long time. I think hydrogen is going to play a significant part in future energy provision within this country in some form or another. And it would be good to be actually to see that plant, and also lead to a future scrutiny agenda item taken into conjunction with 3.4 in the statements on page 56. I think this needs to be a regular item come to scrutiny in the future, perhaps on an annually basis, because the industry is moving so rapidly. The government is changing policy on it so rapidly, and we need to keep pace with that. There are still a lot of questions to be asked as to whether we take part in that regional energy planning and how we go about that. I know that the officers are actually using a tool at the moment from the energy industry, and we're one of the few councils in the country that have been given insight into that, to use that tool going forward. So there is a massive amount of work for the future council to do post May of this year. The members will need to keep pace with it. The officers are going to have a terrific amount of work. It may well be that within the council authority is going to be an additional resource to be able to cope with that work from an officer basis. So I think it is huge. I was confident about suggesting that we did this piece of work because I could see what was happening within the industry. I haven't got the figures to hand. I forgot to write it down about how much financially is the logjam is with industry in this county wanted to progress on forward to boost the economic capabilities of this county, and that industry just can't move forward because of the logjam there is there. And I forget how many thousands it is that is actually tied up at the moment that we just can't move on. I'm also concerned about the deposits being made by industry. We're looking at 200k for projects that are looking at a 10 to 12 year connection dates. That's unacceptable. That's why this is such a very important piece of work. So if I can just move to the recommendations to go in hand with what I've just said. At 6, about lobbying our MPs. The intention originally was to bring the MPs into the room but for the timetable of this council, we ran out of time because we are coming to the end of this council. There's only one more scrutiny meeting in March. So the request was going to be was that we were going to bring the MPs into the room to have that direct conversation with them to impress on them the difficulties that we've got in Dorset in terms of energy provision, how that's affected industry, how that's affected the economy of Dorset as a county. So what I would request in 6 is that we slightly change that recommendation, and it would be to bring the MPs into the council to directly brief them on the issues and the difficulties that are faced with grid infrastructure, and that was highlighted within scrutiny. I think it's better than the letter just going from the Chief Exec and from the leader of the council. I think the MP should come into the room and actually be briefed by the councillors as to what we found and the officers as to what we found, the difficulties that we had around that. So I hope you would be supportive of that. And also, I want to make another recommendation as well at 7, that there is a rolling programme for scrutiny to annually monitor the grid provision in Dorset and associated topics and issues, which I hope you would be supportive as well, members. So did any officer want to comment on those, or are you happy with that? No? Members, are you happy to support those additions to recommendations? Thank you. Okay.
Chairman.
Sorry.
As it's a formal recommendation to Cabinet, can we do it as
Yeah,
proposed
sorry,
and
yeah,
seconded to
sorry.
encompass all of that?
Well, I need a proposer and a seconder for those, please. Thank you, Councillor Gorry. Proposed, seconded. Thank you. All members in favour? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so just to wrap that up then, again, thank you so much, Councillor Mr. Warren, for your report, for all the work you did around that. It was a fantastic piece of, as Mr. Piles has said, scrutiny work, I think. So great thanks for that, and for the support from Mr. Littlechild and Mr. Ford as well, and from Mr. Piles. And thank the Task and Finish group, which was chaired by myself, and also comprised of Councillor Canning, the late Councillor Tony Ferrari, who was sorely missed because of the terrific experience he brought to the committee. And it was his passing was very sad, obviously. Councillor Heatley, Councillor Jones, Councillor Legg, and Councillor Took, and Councillor Kate Weller, that was Councillor Robin Legg. Thank you to all of those as well for the input and the work they did on that. Okay, so thank you. Mr. Warren.
Sorry, can I just also add thanks to Lindsay for putting up with me in diarying and organising diaries to schedule those meetings as well. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. I know exactly what you mean. I couldn't be without her myself either. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to move on to agenda item 10, the Place and Resources Scrutiny Committee Work Programme. Ms. Watson, take us through it. Thank you.
Okay, so Chairman, you have one meeting of the committee remaining in this current council term, which is on 28th of March. Your main item for the agenda is to have a look at an overview of the Planning Transformation Programme. And in addition, you'll be taking your next look at the performance dashboard. Those are the items for that agenda.
Does any member have anything that they wish to flag up at this point? No, we'll do it at the next meeting. Thank you. Have you done all of those?
It's whether anybody's got anything they want to raise.
Yeah. Okay.
Committee, as usual, you have the forward plans for the council's executive arrangements. That's the cabinet forward plan and the forward plans for the 2 shareholder committees. These are on the agenda so that members can review them and see what's coming up at future meetings and identify if there's any potential areas that you as a committee would want to look at for post-decision review.
Thank you. Did any member wish to raise anything at this point in time? No? Take vote for the next meeting. Thank you. So I'll move to agenda item 12, urgent items. There are no urgent items. And I'll move to agenda item 13, exempt business, which there is none. So members, at 12:15, I'm going to close the meeting. Thank you.